The first point is the following. We live still in the times of the global financial crisis. And this graph is basically showing what has happened and why we are still there and what should we expect in the years to come. Because, basically every crisis is the crisis of the debt, of the excessive indebtedness. And this is the global growth of the income or the GDP of all the countries and the increase of the debt, of the global debt. And if there's too much debt, and this debt is, internal. I mean, if you take all the countries, all the institutions together, obviously, the net debt is zero because we do owe, somebody owes it to somebody else. But too much of the debt means too big a financial market, too much of a risk on the financial market, too much of a risk that somebody may go bankrupt. And that's basically the crisis. As you probably know, every crisis has got actually two phases. A crisis we've got with drinking alcohol is normally that first we've got a very nice phase of the crisis, getting drunk, and then it's a nice part, right? And then at a certain moment we must stop, no way. And then there is an unpleasant part of the crisis that is hangover period, right? We are living now in the hangover period, right? What we call a crisis from 2007 or 8 is actually only half of this crisis, the hangover. And the hangover, so there was the moment of getting drunk. That's the from mid-90s, the increase of the debt until the 2007-8. Then there was a moment of kind of a realization, and then there's a hangover period. That's very painful. As a hangover, that's obvious. As you see, the interesting point in this graph is that at the moment when everybody realized that there's too much debt, there was no massive bankruptcy or something. So the debt did not go down. But that was because the governments basically took over the big part of the debt from the private sector. The worst one part were covered basically or taken over by the taxpayers, and that's why there was no big dramatic recession globally, but the problem of the debt has been solved. It was shifted partly to the governments. And now we were, 7 years ago, we were afraid of the situation of the banks, and now we are afraid of the situation of the governments. Not every government, but some of them is more clever than the others. For example, the US government is just avoided the bankruptcy by just printing money and paying with the paper. And the rest of the world is as naive or doesn't have the option but to accept this paper, this green paper from the Americans. So basically, the ways to deal with this by the governments are different. The Germans are telling everybody should start saving, and the Americans are telling, or the Anglo-Saxons are telling, no, everybody should, we should print money and we will take care of the problems later and not now. The poor Greeks or Spaniards don't have the option. They don't print their own money. They must do. And the countries like Poland, for example, must adjust to this. The Chinese must accept the fact that the Americans are paying back their debts with the paper and so on and so on. So everybody has got the problems with this, right? There are no way. Okay, in the long run, there is no other way to finish this crisis but to diminish this discrepancy between, or this huge difference between the debt level and the income level. And that can be done by savings, or that can be done by the inflation. That's a simple economics telling you. So if you print the money, you pay your debts with somebody is paying back the debts with the paper, the normal final effect of this should be the inflation. And the inflation is actually the way to reduce the debt. Now this process of the accumulation of the future debt that was continuing over the first years of the crisis, actually it stopped or was slightly reversed in the United States. It started to be flat in Europe. So maybe it's the beginning of the end of the crisis. Or as Churchill said, it's the end of the beginning, if you prefer. But that still means that many years ahead of us with this situation. So what's going to happen, as I said, nobody knows. And that's the only honest thing about the economics we can say, we don't know. There will be the inflation, global inflation, we don't know. There should be, but when, how big, we don't know. So we've got to wait. For the time being, we are living in a world that's like, the dried forest. Any spark is on the ground and there's a fire. The fire stops in one place, like in America it started, but then the spark goes to Europe, then the spark goes to many other parts of the world. Then any other spark, like for example a political spark, like the Russian behavior, or what's happening in the Middle East, is already causing the economic consequences, right? And there are the question marks still. So if you look at the global economic outlook now, we can say, okay, this year doesn't look very, very bad. America is doing quite well, but at the expense of printing the money, and somehow the world will have at some moment to deal with the consequences of this. By the way, the Americans are very inventive. They never use such bad words like printing money. They call it the quantitative easing. That's quantitative easing. But it's just another word, right? The outlook for China, interesting. China is slowing down. What will be the consequences? Nobody knows. The outlook for Europe, well, about Europe, I will say in 2 words. A slow growth continuing. The outlook for Japan, stagnation still. Russia, we mentioned, because Russia is not one of the economic superpowers, but still worth mentioning, given that we are very far away from Russia, that we are not very far away from Russia. Russia is in a recession because economically Russia obviously is a country that has got fundamental weaknesses, and it was very easy, in a sense, to provoke a recession in Russia by the Americans or by the West. So just an example, Europe. Prince Michael said that about Europe, right? About the political developments in Europe. Well, the problem is Europe is a continent of problems, the European Union. And why? Basically because of the simple problem. There is no decision making. There is no one pilot in the cockpit, and in a difficult situation, it's not easy to do. So that's why, for example, on the military front, Europe cannot compete with Russia, despite the fact that even if you look at the military expenditures of if you add up the military expenditures of the European Union countries, you land with a number that's several times bigger than all the military expenditures of Russia. But Russia is using this, right? The same, unfortunately, in economics, not about Russia, about Europe. Difficult times, no one pilot in a cockpit, and because of these problems. Look, this is the situation 2012-13, right? Big problems in the south. Basically, look at the fire. The fires mean the problems with the debt. So you see why there was a problem in Europe in 2012-13. Then, okay, the problem cooled down. Everybody was expecting, say, 2 years ago or 1 year and a half. Now it's good, but then a new fire. Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, and immediately this picture changed into something like that. So it's showing you this point that I made, that if you are in a situation when any spark causes a fire, and moreover, you don't have an effective fire brigade because you've got a fire brigade of 27 firemen that each of them tries to decide about the direction of the car and so on and so on. It's difficult to deal with this. Well, now, fortunately, the situation improves. Not for Russia and for the Ukraine because they are in the recession, but for the rest of Europe, the prospects are okay. But please, look, first, Europe is still not growing fast. Europe is not comfortable with the situation. Europe cannot use, for example, the money in such an efficient way as the Americans are using it to solve its own problems. Europe is still in the slow growth. And that's still a future of Europe. And moreover, if you look at this once again, Greece. Okay, Greece may go bankrupt any week practically. Probably without huge consequences for the rest of the world, but then we've got the elections. Okay, and any election, a question mark. Greece, the election, a question mark, is Greece going to leave the Eurozone, the Grexit? Britain, a Brexit, is it true or not? Spain, the election autumn, Podemos kind of Syriza of Spain, and big increase in the populistic movement, anti-austerity. We will see what's going to happen, but definitely Europe is still a continent of troubles. Economically, this year doesn't look pretty bad, but still the question marks are open, and then the immigrants, as Prince Mikhail said, I mean, it's reminding us that the problems of Europe is not just growth. The problem is also the demographics, the ability to cooperate, the ability to integrate the immigrants into Europe, and so on and so on. So many problems ahead of Europe, despite the fact that, as I said, this year doesn't look terribly bad. But still, Brexit, I mean, those are only the symptoms of the problems Europe is still facing, and we are the part of this world in Poland. We very much are worried about how it will develop in the future. I hope I'm a Euro-optimistic guy. I mean, as Europe later or earlier will find its way out of the troubles, but for the time being, the troubles are still here. Thank you.